But if you know, you know. But if you know, you know.
It's crazy to think that it's been an entire decade since the end of How I Met Your Mother. 10 years to conclude a show that started almost 20 years ago. It honestly doesn't feel like it's been that long. Time really does fly. Or I'm just getting old, I don't know, man. I was a big fan of How I Met Your Mother when I was a teenager, as were a lot of people. It was a hit show by every definition of the term. The hype around this series was no joke. From its very first season to its last, How I Met Your Mother had pop culture in a chokehold. Even if you weren't watching it, you just could not escape it. It was everywhere. As we all know, though, this show kinda dropped the ball. They kinda messed up at the end. If you go around the internet and encounter any top 10 list of the worst series finales of all time, I'm willing to bet that every single one of them will mention the series finale of How I Met Your Mother. Very few shows have managed to rival the absolute scandal caused by that finale. It was kinda crazy. And I can say, as someone who was watching the show week to week for years, experiencing the ending along with the rest of the world was just wild. Like, we all love to talk about bad TV endings like Game of Thrones, Dexter, or Pretty Little Liars, which are all terrible, don't get me wrong, but I don't think people truly remember just how loud the anger was when How I Met Your Mother ended. Because at the time it did, in 2014, we had never really seen something like that happen. But now it's been a decade, and I haven't taken a look at the show's final season in years. And while How I Met Your Mother has remained extremely relevant online over the years, I feel like most people avoid talking about the ending. It's kind of an unspoken rule of the internet. We just collectively chose to forget about it. So recently, I started getting really curious to see how the ending of the show has aged. Like, I started to wonder how I would feel about the ending now with a completely different lens. I mean, who knows? Maybe it wasn't as bad as we thought it was back then. Maybe the outrage wasn't entirely justified, or maybe it was. Maybe, in retrospect, we were too hard on it? I don't know, it piqued my curiosity. 10 years is a long enough time, and that was starting to take over my brain, so I finally decided to sit down and rewatch the ending of the show. It had been a pretty long time, so there are a lot of details I didn't remember clearly, which made it very interesting to re-explore. So today, friends, we're going to take a look back at How I Met Your Mother's ending 10 years later. But before we get into it, lately I've very much been into photography. It's a very fun and creative hobby that I picked up a few months ago that helps me quiet my brain when things are hectic, and I'm always looking for ways to improve my skills with it. So imagine my surprise when I found out recently that one of my favorite photographers and YouTubers, Jessica Kabaisi, has made a DSLR photography class that is part of a learning path on Skillshare, the sponsor of today's video. Oh yeah. Skillshare is a massive online community where you can learn pretty much anything you want. Really, anything. It is basically an infinite pool of knowledge. There are literally thousands of fascinating classes for curious and creative people about pretty much anything you would like to explore or any goal you would like to reach. From illustration and filmmaking to web design, just about anything you can think of, they have a class for it ready to help you learn. And not only do they help you discover new passions, they also help you go deeper with your knowledge thanks to curated, sequential class collections called learning paths, designed to help you master a specific skill or hobby. They give you a very clear direction through the topic you decide to learn about and save you time from searching because they're made to have a seamless flow and it makes everything very easy. Like this learning path curated for DSLR photography, with classes by Justin Bridges or Jessica Kabaisi, who I adore, and to put it simply, it has been the perfect starting point I've been looking for to get into it. Honestly, no goal is too small with Skillshare. You can find a class to learn anything. And you know what? You guys are in luck, because the first 500 people to use the link in the description will be able to get a month free trial of Skillshare. You can go and explore the platform and learn about anything you would like for an entire month for free. Anything you want, the whole thing will be at your disposal. So this is your chance to go and explore any topic you're curious about. So check out the link in my description, join Skillshare, and start learning. Thank you so much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. You guys are the best, and let's get back to the video. So, for the uninitiated, How I Met Your Mother is the story of Ted Mosby, a young and ambitious architect living in New York City with his two best friends from college and newly engaged couple, Marshall and Lily. The story is actually told from the perspective of Ted 25 years in the future. The show is framed around the scenario of him sitting his future children down to tell them the story of how he met their mother. And so he narrates the story of his life and experiences, retracing all the major and minor events that led him to meeting the love of his life throughout an entire decade. We witness the craziest stories Ted lived alongside Marshall and Lily, but also with his strange friend Barney, a methodical and unethical womanizer who leads him to meet Robin, a Canadian journalist who drastically changes the course of Ted's life. On the surface, How I Met Your Mother is sort of framed as a serialized romantic comedy, but the reality is, this is a show about life. We're following a group of friends as they experience life. The joys, the sorrows, the extraordinary, and the mundane. The realities of being an adult. We see them fall in love, we see them heartbroken, we watch them as they are faced with the fear of starting a new job, having issues when getting a new apartment, being nervous on a first date, struggling with your career path, the pain of losing a parent, the difficulties of becoming a parent, the epic highs and lows of high school football. No, wrong show. It's a huge melting pot of relatable human experiences through the lens of a charismatic group of friends you can't help but get attached to. It's not reinventing the wheel by any means, but How I Met Your Mother truly managed to tell its story in an incredibly charming way that made it very unique. The show shapes its storytelling and even its sense of humor through an extremely clever use of time jumps, which is a massive part of its artistic identity. The episodes are almost never taking place in a linear timeline. Instead, they build tension, twists, and comedic timing by constantly jumping back and forth in different points in time. This unusual storytelling model is not only ambitious, but also allows for the writers to get creative with how the stories play out, and it also paves the way for a good amount of recurring gags that, in time, became iconic inside jokes for audiences.
True story.
How I Met Your Mother was a massive pop culture phenomenon, often referred to as the successor of Friends, mainly because it started airing in 2005, just about a year after Friends ended its 10-year run, leaving television and audiences with a gigantic void to fill with a new super popular sitcom about fun, attractive, white 20-somethings. It was perfect timing, and the show became an internet darling that led to legend,
Wait for it.
dairy memes, and an insane amount of fan theories about various plot points in the show. Namely, the very secretive and highly anticipated reveal of the mother's identity. For 8 seasons, we watched the friend group go through life in a lot of different ways, some of which became massive plot points pertaining to the title of the show. Ted falls in love with Robin, they have an intense romance, but they don't work out. Eventually, Robin falls in love with someone else. So does Ted, despite lingering feelings. He gets engaged, he is then left at the altar, he falls in love again. Years and years of failed romances occur as he relentlessly looks for his one true love, the mother we were all waiting to meet. Robin eventually finds her true love in Barney, while Marshall and Lily get married, become parents, and build a life as adequately as they can. Audiences were in love with these characters. They were incredibly invested in this story. The show was written in a very engaging way, with great twists and genuinely jaw-dropping cliffhangers, and with all of the little mysteries making the show talk, there was a lot of buzz and excitement about its eventual ending. All was well, the world was happy. And then came the final season. Season 9 of How I Met Your Mother is really weird and bad. It's weird and bad. The season has a grand total of 24 episodes and takes place over one weekend. 24 episodes of TV that take place in 3 days. It is probably the biggest stretching of time ever put on television, and it's just a weird decision. The season does have its moments here and there, but overall, from the first couple of episodes, you can just tell that something about the show feels off. The vibe is different, it's odd, it doesn't hit the same. The dynamic between the characters also feels a bit different, which is probably not helped by the fact that Marshall is not even with the rest of the gang for half of the season. It's something that always felt weird to me, but recently I found out that Jason Segel, who played Marshall, was apparently very unhappy on the show during its last few years, and he allegedly intended to leave the show after season 8. He was not supposed to come back for the final season, but after long discussions with CBS, the production managed to convince him to come back to the show for the final season, although in a somewhat reduced role that would allow him to focus on other projects and not have as hectic of a shooting schedule. That, and they probably offered him a fuckload of money too. So yeah, if you've ever wondered why season 9 makes this really weird decision to have Marshall separated from the rest of the cast as he goes on a weird side quest to get to the wedding, that's why. But anyways, like I said, the entirety of season 9, all 24 episodes of it, take place during the weekend of Robin and Barney's wedding. At that point, through various storylines that happened throughout the seasons, we already knew that this wedding is where Ted was going to meet the mother. So naturally, the writers used this entire season to build up to that moment. Again, a very strange decision timeline-wise, but it is what it is. This is also the season that is all about the mother, and that is where all of the fan theories about the show's ending came to a head. Like I said earlier, the internet was obsessing over the identity of the mother, and over the years, it got really crazy. Some fans firmly believed that the mother was a character we already knew, and others were convinced the mother had yet to be introduced and was going to be played by a super famous actress in a big surprise reveal, and everyone was theorizing about who was going to be playing her. Michelle Trachtenberg was a huge rumor that lasted for years. A lot of fans were convinced she was going to appear in the show as the mother. Jessica Alba was another name that floated for a very long time. I even remember a Facebook group that was heavily supporting the theory that the mother was going to be played by Angelina Jolie. Like, it was a wild time on the internet. Then, at some point, rumors started to emerge that Rachel Bilson of the OC fame was going to appear on the show, something that apparently had been secretly in the works for a very long time, and fans were convinced she was going to play the mother. Rachel Bilson eventually did appear in the show, but it was a red herring, because she was eventually revealed to be not the mother, but the mother's roommate, who briefly dated Ted years before he met the mother. Some people were also convinced the mother was going to be Victoria, one of Ted's most important love interests in the entire show. She was a fan favorite, and no, she did not end up being the mother, but it was later confirmed by the creators that Victoria was actually their backup plan to wrap up the show with no loose ends in case it was cancelled before they could end it the way they wanted. So, the fans were half right with this one. These were just a few theories among many of them, but ultimately, every theory about the mother's identity ended up being wrong. And it turns out that the writers had secretly told us that a very, very long time ago. More specifically, in episode 9 of season 1. It's the first Thanksgiving episode of the show, and it ends with Ted, Barney, and Robin finding themselves in a strip club. Ted is approached by one of the strippers who introduces herself as Amber before switching up and revealing to him her real name, Tracy. And once we hear her name, this happens.
I'm Amber.
I'm Ted.
Actually, I'm Tracy.
Still Ted.
And that, kids, is the true story of how I met your mother.
What? I'm kidding.
That's how the episode ends. And what seemed like a random joke at the end of an episode was actually a gigantic piece of the puzzle given to us by the writers, but pretty much everybody missed it on their first watch, me included. It's by far the biggest clue they ever gave us. The kids' reaction to Ted meeting this stripper is there because the kids recognize their mother's name. The show actually reveals to us in season 1 that the mother's name is Tracy. Therefore, any theory that didn't involve a woman named Tracy was going to be automatically wrong. And yes, as we now know from the end of the show, the mother's name was Tracy McConnell, and she wasn't played by Angelina Jolie, she was played by Kristen Milotti, who was relatively unknown at the time. She was officially introduced in the final scene of the season 8 finale, and then appeared regularly in season 9 as this mysterious woman who meets Ted's friends in different situations around the wedding. Long story short, the final season is messy, and after season 8 having already been criticized for being largely uneventful, there was a lot of scrutiny over how season 9 was going to play out, and for most of its run, it was sort of confusing and disappointing, and it just felt like it dragged for way too long, and audiences could feel that as they waited for the answers to all of their questions. 9 years is a long time to be invested into a show and its story, so despite the season feeling tired, there was still a global sense of enthusiasm about the upcoming finale. So how does it end? How does the show conclude? Well, that's a pretty well-known story, but let's go over it quickly. The series finale of How I Met Your Mother does fulfill the promise of the title, although it does it in a very clumsy way. After a lot of convoluted time hopping that shows different points in the lives of the main characters between the years 2014 and 2030, including Ted's wedding, we finally get to see the moment Ted met the mother. And for all the criticism I have of the finale and of season 9 as a whole, I gotta be honest, the actual scene where Ted and the mother meet is really good. It's so sweet. It's a very cheesy but charming sequence that truly delivers on the promise of this meeting being so incredibly memorable to Ted.
You're Cindy's ex-roommate, right?
Yeah, and you are the professor. Econ 305?
Econ 305? I don't teach. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I'm gonna jump onto the tracks now.
No, don't.
It's so cute. Like, on paper, that scene is perfectly executed. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. The problem is what came right before the scene and what came right after. Right before the show cuts to the scene of the first meeting, Ted talks about what Tracy means to him, how getting to experience life by her side was the greatest gift he was ever given, and how he cherished every moment with her, even after she got sick. Yeah, that's when the show revealed that the mother was hit with an unidentified disease that brought on some dark times. After that, we go back in time and you get to see the scene where they first meet, closing the loop of the show and catching us up to 2030 with future Ted telling the story to his children. We finally get to see them react to the entire tale their father told them, and it is in this scene that they officially confirm to the audience that the mother is dead. She was dead this whole time. She got sick at some point with some disease, and she passed away off screen sometime in the year 2024. And basically, the whole point of this very long story is that 6 years after Tracy's death, Ted wants to ask for his children's blessing because it turns out that he is still in love with Robin and he wants to try and give their relationship another chance. That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
That is the end of How I Met Your Mother. That is how the show concludes. Now, it's been 10 years. I just rewatched the ending with a completely new lens, and no matter how I try to look at it, it just doesn't work. It's like itchy. It gives me the same icky feeling of dissatisfaction and irritation that it gave me and millions of people 10 years ago. Every time I watch this finale, it feels like I'm being bamboozled, but not in the right way. It's like a bad trick. It's not impressive, the twist comes out of nowhere and feels weirdly out of place. And the reason for that is simple, and believe it or not, it's not because of the show's bad writing, it's actually because of the show's good writing. Let me explain. The reason why the series finale of How I Met Your Mother doesn't work is simply because, unfortunately for itself, How I Met Your Mother did a fantastic job at ending Ted and Robin's romance. It's as stupid as that. A very well-written resolution to their romantic relationship is the reason why the ending feels like a betrayal. The conclusion feels jarring and out of left field because it doesn't feel faithful to the story that was being told. And as a result, it's a story that serves as a fantastic vehicle for character assassination. Basically, the ending of the show had been determined back in 2006. The reason why they had to lock it in so early is because they needed to shoot the part of the ending that involved Ted's children. They had to shoot it then because they didn't want to take the risk to have the show run for too long, say for example 9 seasons, and have to shoot the ending with the kids that would no longer look like kids. So basically, since 2006, the writers had an ending prepared that they were unable to change. And David Henry and Lindsay Fonseca, who played the kids, had to keep the secret of the ending for almost a decade. But the thing is, shooting it in 2006 was like signing a contract. This was now the only outcome the show could have, no matter what. No matter what road they took along the way, the finish line would have to be that the mother died and that this was really all about Robin. And the fundamental issue with that is simply that by the time How I Met Your Mother actually reached its end 8 years later in 2014, the identity of the show had completely changed. This was no longer the story of Ted and Robin. It hadn't been in a really long time. We had been past that point for years. This was no longer the story of Ted and Robin. Therefore, this was no longer the story that this ending was designed for. And that is why it made people so angry. After all this time, after all of this, the show confirms in its last couple of minutes that yes, indeed, this entire series was about the love story of Ted and Robin, even though by this point, these two characters had not been romantically involved for the majority of the show. And like I said, unfortunately for itself, the show did too good of a job at making people okay with that. There are several episodes at different points of the show that are dedicated to wrapping Ted and Robin's romance up with a perfect little bow and solidifying to the audience that they didn't work out, that they are now best friends, that Robin is going to be with Barney, and it makes perfect sense. They did an incredible job at concluding Ted and Robin's romance and leaving it behind. And it's not something they tried to move away from. Episode 17 of season 9 has one final storyline dedicated to this very purpose again. The episode takes place on the morning of Robin and Barney's wedding, and Ted tells Robin he still has feelings for her. Which, by the way, is a real dick move. Ted is a petty bitch, a fucking terrible friend, and a selfish asshole, but that's another conversation. In this episode, the show hammers in once again that Ted's feelings are not reciprocated. Robin moved on years ago, and this final look at their romantic story ends with this symbolic shot of Ted finally letting Robin go. This was the show's ultimate reiteration of the reality that Ted and Robin did not work together. Something the show had been drilling into the audience's heads for several seasons. And again, audiences accepted this. The show made it make sense. It wrapped it up perfectly. Ted and Robin did not make sense together. Ted had a very specific vision of what he wanted out of love and out of life, and absolutely nothing about that vision was Robin. Ted wanted to find a wife, have children, settle down, and live in a beautiful home and carry the perfect sedentary family lifestyle he had always pictured for himself. Robin wanted to travel the world and pursue her professional endeavors. She did not want to have children ever and eventually found out she was unable to have children anyway. And settling down, living a quiet family life in a suburban home is the opposite of what she pictures her ideal future to be. Those positions were absolute. Ted was always going to pursue his family lifestyle vision, and he was not willing to budge on that. And Robin was always going to put her career first, and she was not willing to budge on that. The show made it very clear. Ted and Robin were not compatible. Ted had a hard time accepting it, but Robin had accepted it years ago, and she moved on and fell in love with someone else. This was no longer their story. It hadn't been since the end of season 2. So when the show suddenly pulls a 180, essentially negating the entire story it's been telling for the last 7 years, people rightfully felt betrayed, especially because some of their favorite characters got ruined as a result. In the 2-part finale, Robin suddenly switches up on everything she believes in and tells Lily that Ted is the man she probably should have ended up with. And she even expresses that it hurts to watch him be with his perfect wife and the mother of his beautiful children. Essentially saying that she regrets letting him go and would want to be in Tracy's place. And I'm sorry, that is a fundamental betrayal of Robin's character. It's quite literally spitting in her face. It goes against everything she stands for. Like, you have to understand, Robin is a career-driven individual whose personal goals are very much anchored in her achievements. Her work is everything to her. Since day one, her career always comes first. Through all of her romantic plot lines, from Ted to random guys and even Barney, the show has always made it very clear that at the end of the day, Robin will always choose her ambition. She will always choose her career. It will always be her #1 priority. That is what defines her as a woman, and she will never allow even her deepest romantic relationships to stand in the way of that. Hell, the show cowardly tells you in the finale that she and Barney divorced a couple years after their wedding because her work was taking too much space and it made them very unhappy in their marriage, but she had no intention of slowing down. I'm sorry, but Robin suddenly flicking a switch and saying she regrets all of that and wish she had ended up with Ted and lived the life he wanted is character assassination. This is taking a character that had a very coherent characterization and arc throughout the entire show and throwing her off a cliff at the last second. It makes no sense. And the same can be said for Barney. Saying Barney Stinson was ruined by the finale is like the biggest understatement in the world. They essentially took what was a long and very meticulously crafted character arc and completely butchered it at the finish line. And in a matter of minutes, too. Essentially, over the seasons, Barney comes to understand through his relationship with Robin and Quinn that his womanizer lifestyle is not fulfilling. Because he did all these things because he felt empty, insecure, unloved, and lonely. It's established on numerous occasions that due to his father leaving him as a baby and not ever being fully sure of who his father even was, and due to an ex-girlfriend who broke his heart in a very abrupt way, Barney's life is basically being controlled by his fear of abandonment. Everything he is as a person, all of the very obnoxious toxicity he identifies himself with, has stemmed from people he genuinely loved leaving him or neglecting him. The way he dresses, the way he carries himself, his need to sleep with as many women as he can, it's a smokescreen, it's a facade. And I feel like that's something a lot of people don't get about him, from men who venerate his antics like the ones of a god to people who complain about how the show glorifies his behavior. They are all missing the point here. Barney is not cool. He's hilarious and memorable, but he's not cool. He's pathetic. That's always been the point of his character. He's pathetic. He's a lonely, emotionally closed off, insecure boy with daddy issues who thinks tricking women into liking him for a period of time short enough that he doesn't have time to get attached to them will somehow protect him from being abandoned again. His entire facade as this suave dude in a perfect suit is a direct result of his abandonment issues. Everyone is always telling him how lame he is. He's always tricking women by doing these crazy things because he can't actually get a woman to like him if he's being himself. And every time characters like Ted or Marshall follow him in his weird escapades, it's when they are mentally and emotionally at their lowest. They have to go down to his level because he's pathetic. That's always been the point of Barney. His arc has always been about him growing out of this coping mechanism of a facade that anyone who has taken a second to care about him can see right through. But because he gets laid a whole bunch, a lot of men watching this show completely miss the point of the character and think he's like the ultimate Chad and like an inspiration or whatever, completely oblivious to the fact that what the show is getting at is that Barney might get laid a lot, but he still feels empty and insecure. His lifestyle is not helping, it is only feeding his insecurities. The show doesn't glorify his behavior. Everyone around Barney only ever tells him he's disgusting and creepy. And the show sets a very long path to lead Barney himself to realize it too. It's only when he falls in love with someone who convinces him he can be loved for who he is deep down, insecurities and all, that he understands he was wrong this whole time. It's actually a pretty incredible character arc. He gets to have a very slow but impactful evolution. The man Barney is in season 9 is very far removed from the man he was in season 1. He's still eccentric and bougie as hell, but he is a way more respectable man than before. He has grown significantly. He learned to love someone and he learned to be loved and let go of his obsessive need to hide any form of weakness or vulnerability. He allows himself to open up, to be vulnerable, and in Robin, he finds someone who truly accepts him for who he is, and he learns to give in to that. And then the finale decides that, nope, we're gonna bring Barney back to 1. And we find out that after his divorce with Robin, he learned nothing. He just goes back to being the obnoxious womanizer with no moral compass who gets a kick out of manipulating women and literally does not live for any other reason than to find the next woman he's gonna get to bang. They just erase all of his character development and bring him back to the pathetic creep he was in season 1. It's literally character assassination by time travel. Fuck his arc. Fuck his growth. Nothing that happened to him in the last decade mattered. He has learned nothing. The finale completely ruined him. And the fact that all of that came with the audience being made to fall in love with Tracy, the mother, only for the show to go into the finale like, oh, yeah, the mother. Sure, yeah, she's dead. She's dead. She doesn't really matter anyway. This is not about her. This was never about her. Like, yeah, obviously people are gonna be angry. It's ending the show after 9 years with a giant middle finger to the audience. You made the show evolve into something completely different from its early days, and then tried to pull an ending expecting people to have the same feelings about Ted and Robin as they did back in season 2 when you decided what the ending was gonna be. That's a stupid decision. Now, as you probably all know, even if you've never watched the show, the ending of How I Met Your Mother created an absolute pop culture shitstorm when it aired. It was an insane thing to witness. The internet was in flames, some actors had to do interviews to defend the ending, the press was fucking blasting the show. It was really bad. And understandably so. Coming at the end of a season that was largely considered disappointing, the series finale was immediately perceived as an insulting final bow. And to this day, it is still considered to be one of the worst TV finales of all time. And this colossal backlash against the show got so loud and so heavy that a decision was made by the creators. A few months after the finale aired, the final season of How I Met Your Mother was released on DVD, and in it, the creators of the show included an alternate ending. Now, I'm sure we've all heard about it, I'm sure we've all seen it. The ending is essentially a re-edit of the one that aired on television. It was reworked to completely erase every part of the finale that talked about the mother being dead, and it completely wiped out any scene that touched on Ted and Robin, including the flash forward with Ted's kids. Instead, the alternate ending focuses on the love between all the characters, then reminisces on Ted's ridiculously eventful love life as he talks to his kids about how all the hardships he faced through the years were worth it because they led him to their mother.
It was a long road. You might even say it was really, 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 really long. But difficult? Nah. It was life.
Then we get the amazing scene where Ted meets Tracy. That one is left unchanged, and as the emotion crescendos, we hear Ted say the final words of the series.
And that, kids, is How I Met Your Mother.
And that's it. That's how it ends. This alternate ending takes a way more literal approach and literally ends right after Ted and Tracy's very first conversation, which makes so much sense. It hits all the emotional beats and it overall just makes the conclusion less messy and more coherent for the characters. The alternate ending is now largely considered by fans to be the superior one, and most people are still low-key upset that it's technically not the canon ending. And revisiting this 10 years later, yeah, I can't help but agree. Even after all this time, the ending of How I Met Your Mother just doesn't work. No matter how I try to look at it, it doesn't work. It's really an unfortunate display of a show that was trapped by its own conclusion and didn't know how to get there after having evolved past it. There are some decisions here that I will just never understand. If you knew the ending was going to reunite Ted and Robin, then why make the entirety of the final season about Robin and Barney's wedding? Why put so much effort into wrapping Ted and Robin's romance up with a perfect little bow? Why was there no setup for that door still being open? If you knew this whole time that this was going to be the end game, why did you keep running in the opposite direction until the very last episode? I don't think I'll ever understand it. It's like they categorically refused to commit to the ending until they literally had no choice. And in approaching it that way, they ruined everything. It makes Ted's love story with Tracy ring kinda hollow, it completely destroys everything Robin has ever stood for, and it completely erases all of the character development Barney was awarded over years. And worst of all, it makes the entire story of the show past season 2 kinda useless. So yeah, 10 years later, this is still one of the worst finales on television. I do think it deserves its spot on that podium. How I Met Your Mother's canon ending is really bad and really frustrating, and revisiting it only makes me understand audiences even more for how pissed off they were about it. It was just a fantastically executed series of bad decisions, and deciding to stick to this ending while doing zero groundwork to build up to it in the final season? What were you thinking? To this day, the fact that all of season 9 is about Robin and Barney's wedding, and that the second they finally get married, we are immediately told that they just divorced 3 years later, is mind-blowing to me. I don't know in what world the writers thought this was gonna work out. Killing of the mother, making Robin the endgame, everything about this finale just feels so wrong, even after all this time. I enjoy rewatching the show here and there, but the last couple of times I rewatched the whole series, I stopped at the end of season 8. Not that it's a satisfying ending, but it always kind of pains me to watch this show undo everything it accomplished and destroy everything that made people so attached to it. And season 9 is also just really boring and redundant. Anyway. Did you know that Sheldon from The Big Bang Theory almost played the role of Barney?
Wait for it. Bazinga.
No? Well, now you do, and you will never be able to get that image out of your head. You're welcome. Okay, bye. Unpopular opinion. I like that Ted got back with Robin.
You are sorely mistaken. What in the fuck is wrong with y'all?
No, they were never good together.
Yeah.
They were like cute middle on when they're dating before they like really stop and think about the fact that like Robin doesn't want kids and that's all Ted wants. So.
There's literally 2 seasons worth of their story where the point of it is they don't work.
Yeah, it's literally just driving home to the audience, to themselves, that no matter how hard Ted tries, they don't work. Robin doesn't want it to work. She's like, no, it's not you.
Yeah.
To just have it be like,
Actually, that's maybe kind of what I wanted the whole time.
Your kids are teenagers.